Welcome, everyone, to this week's Friday Zoom with Mary Jane and myself. We are so happy that you're here with us for another week. For recording purposes, just to introduce myself, I'm Jan Jeremias. I'm a health and wellness coach. I've been working in the health world for over 35 years and into holistic health and well-being and working with people and their pets for over 20. Um, I truly value this community and what Mary Jane and I continue to create to help people live more fulfilled lives and to recognize that they must take care of themselves in order to take care of others. And so I'll pass it to Mary Jane, but it's really wonderful to have you all here. And Mary Jane, to you.
Thanks, Jan. Yes, I really, I always feel blessed to be here in presence with all of you, and of course, with always with Jan. We're co-founders of Spirit Born Imaginings, and so for us, it's a space really of just intentional conversations and meditative experiences. So inviting you really just to slow down and soften and reconnect with yourself. And it's the one of the pillars of my business. Of course, I am a graphic designer, have my own creative studio where I support my fellow entrepreneurs and others for their graphic needs, whatever that may be. And but again, we welcome you to this space of presence, compassion, and curiosity. And where mindfulness and breath, energy awareness, and creative reflection come together really to support self nurturing and self kindness as we move through our own inner transformation, whatever that path looks like for each of us. As always, there's nothing that you need to do here or achieve here, really just an invitation to arrive exactly as you are in this moment. And to begin today, I have a poem, which I'm sure several of you might be familiar with, but it's always worth reflecting back on it because it's just really a great um, invitation to listen inward and take a moment to sense what's present for us today. And it's titled The Guest House, and it's by Rumi. This being human is a guest house. Every morning, a new arrival, a joy, a depression, a meanness. Some momentary awareness comes as an unexpected visitor. Welcome and entertain them all, even if they're a crowd of sorrows who violently sweep your house empty of its furniture. Still treat each guest honorably. He may be clearing you out for some new delight. The dark thought, the shame, the malice, meet them at the door laughing and invite them in. Be grateful for whoever comes, because each has been sent as a guide from beyond.
Thank you so much, Mary Jane, for sharing that wonderful poem by Rumi. So we welcome you to The River Does Not Resist. What if we didn't either? This is a space to pause, to step out of the constant movement of doing, fixing, and figuring things out, and to gently turn towards your own experience with more awareness, curiosity, and care. So much of our energy can go into resisting what feels uncomfortable. We push away certain thoughts, avoid certain feelings, tighten against certain experiences, and yet what we resist often persists. Not because anything is wrong, but because resistance itself gives it more energy, more attention, and more life within us. When something is pushed away, it doesn't disappear. It often settles into the body as tension, lingers in the mind as repetitive thought, or quietly shapes our reactions without us even realizing it. In this way, resistance can become a pattern, one that keeps us caught in the very experience we are trying to move beyond. And perhaps also important is that resistance can be meaningful. It can show us where something is asking to be felt rather than avoided, where something remains unfinished or unacknowledged, where there may be something to understand, to make peace with, or even to forgive ourselves for. Rather than something to eliminate, resistance can become information, a signal, even an invitation. In our time together, we'll explore this in a grounded and experienced way. We'll begin to notice where resistance lives in the body and the mind, and where we brace, where we hold, where we subtly or strongly push against what is here. And we'll gently experiment with another way, not by forcing change, but by allowing space, not by analyzing, but by noticing, not by pushing through, but softening into. Can we meet them differently, with compassion instead of judgment, with kindness instead of struggle, with a little more ease, even in what feels difficult? And as we do, something begins to shift. What once felt overwhelming may soften, what felt stuck may begin to move, and what demanded effort may begin to unfold more naturally. This is not about giving up or resigning ourselves to what is. It is about changing our relationship to it so that instead of reinforcing patterns of tension and avoidance, we begin to create space, awareness, and possibility. Like the river, there may be another way to move, one that does not rely on force, but on allowing, one that does not fight what is, but learns how to move with it. We're so glad you're here and that you're willing to explore this with us. Welcome.
It's such an interesting topic, and thank you to those that talked about whatever we resist persists last week. And it's very true. It's interesting, when we were doing some research for a thing, one of the many of the articles, talked about how that whole concept of, when we what we resist persists. And it was interesting, right? Because it was like I mean, I guess I looked at it somewhat this way, but I never really thought about it in the sense where it's like how there's like that paradox of resistance, right? Um, you oppose reality of whatever is happening, external thing, an internal emotional state, whatever it is. And when we resist it and we oppose it, we actually strengthen our attachment to it. And so it was interesting that its resistance really not is not seen, or not invites us not to see it as just a just as an avoidance, but it's kind of a like being entangled with it. And so, we spend so much energy pushing stuff away that, it really can occupy our awareness for sure. It persists, shall we say.
Yeah, it does. It is very energetically draining to push something away. And I also loved the fact that they used entangled and meshed um, because I think when we force something not to hold on to something, it's kind of like, first of all, it like perpetuates its own anxiety because when it pops up, we feel anxious. And it's almost like we're immediately on guard already. It's kind of like, okay, that's what I want to keep away, and so then all of a sudden we get wrapped up in it again. And it becomes such a focus where our like attention automatically goes. And it could be a time when a similar feeling comes up or whatever, and we're not even, and it isn't that big. But because it's attached to this thing we're trying to avoid, it almost amplifies both. And it reminds me of the story, I think it was of the Buddha, who's, it's the arrow story where something happens and you're shot with an arrow. and then your repetitive thinking about something, or the constant, arrows that keep on firing and hitting you. And that's even worse than just the original circumstance, is that constant attachment to whatever it is, or that constant, like, oh, well, I don't want to think about that, or I don't want to feel that. I don't want that experience. So energetically draining.
Absolutely. And it was just like, I love that you brought up the word experience, because that was one of the things that like some of the articles sort of like leaned into, is that, you know, really that, we often think of emotions or emotional state of something that's going on, or things that we need to solve. And emotions aren't those. They're things that need to be experienced. And so, you know, um, even if it is painful, and we know that those experiences do happen, of course, that's just the the nature of life. But when we stop resisting them, that, and we take time to sort of sit with those emotions and feel those emotions and let those emotions process, then we can let them go, we can release them. And maybe it opens up an even greater opportunity that we haven't even seen or thought of at this point. So,
Absolutely. And what Seamus said in the comments is really true. It's not all, it's easier said than done.
oh, of course.
Because I think it's very challenging at times to sit with whatever we're going through, to be in an experience that's challenging. I was having this conversation with one of my students yesterday about why we like those like experiences that we don't want to have, and how we spend a lot of time there, and why, and it's the great fear of like change, of difference. It's like, it's knowing the devil versus not knowing the devil. It's like knowing what you're in, even if it's bad, um, and not quite knowing what's going to happen if you were to move on and go into something new. Um, I think, whether a situation is bad or good, you kind of like, you learn how to navigate the parameters and the experience, and, you know, how to protect yourself and how to shield yourself and how to move through life. And then all of a sudden, when that's there, I think there's a whole big questioning of like, of now what? And what do I do? And who am I if I'm not this? And all these deep questions come up, which I think we try to avoid, so we get very used to getting stuck in a particular situation, whether it's bad or not. And so getting stuck, or, resisting a situation because you don't want to deal with something, is very, is, I think, a very, um, it's just a very powerful and experience, I think, that at times we all have. Seamus, please.
Yeah, thanks, guys. And yeah, like we've had Rumi on and that poem mentioned before in some of our previous conversations. I just love that poem as well. It kind of brings so much, so concisely and crisply, like to relevance, like and application. So and back to the word experience, I think you were just speaking to, like it's what happens, the experience when you choose to not resist, but choose actually to just sit and be with and successfully do that. It's the experience that emerges. It's the kind of the penny dropping moment of, okay, I can see now that I didn't welcome this guest before, but now that I have chosen to, and even though it feels right to resist because I don't value that guest, when we do begin to experience the value of sitting with that guest and experience what it feels like to learn from that guest, when we tell ourselves like that there's nothing possibly good I could learn from that guest or that emotion or that feeling or that person, I think that's the power of this practice. Basically, is the mechanism through which we can welcome all future guests through trusting ourselves and um, taking making that choice to be with the guest that we felt we couldn't be with before. And I think once we do that several times, I think it becomes easier for us to begin to welcome all guests. And I think that's what's really the central point in Rumi's poem is that, looking at the keywords like around choice and resistance and experience, I think when we choose, and against the simplicity of this, when we choose to simply sit and be with, that's when there's a profound reward for us because through that simple process, which is very difficult to do, we experience the powerful benefits of that process, I suppose. So, and again, the more we do it, I think the better we're prepared to engage with ourselves, our own emotions, and better prepared to engage and welcome the perspectives and insights and what we might often um, categorize as resistance to engage with other people's and other people's perspectives as well. So yeah, there's no end of benefits, I think, when we can be successful in sitting with what's there rather than resisting, I guess,
Absolutely, Seamus. And as you were speaking, it reminded me of um, the Rumi poem, but in addition, I've mentioned before, I remember when I went and did a workshop with Pima Chodron, who's, some of her books are Getting Unstuck, Comfortable with Uncertainty, and some other wonderful, wonderful Tibetan Buddhist meditation teacher. And um, she says that when we have those deep, dark emotions, like, trauma, and we're going through deep sadness or grief, she said it almost feels like we're dying, like, whatever. And she said, the realization is like when you do it and everybody laughed, but you're like, oh my gosh, I can experience this, and I'm not dead. Like that's what she said on stage. And I remember like laughing but not laughing because that's how it feels. And I remember like that phrase coming to my mind like under certain circumstances when I would like let myself feel something and I'd be like, okay, well, I'm not dead. Like I'm still here. But I think it feels like a kind of death of ourselves. And so it's like, oh my gosh, I'm still here, I'm still breathing, my everything in my my body is still working, blood is still flowing, all those types of things. And I just still to this day when I go through something, I'm like, okay, I'm not dead. I haven't died yet. And so, but when she said it, and I think it's so funny when great teachers talk like that because they are so human. And that's what makes them great teachers is the fact that they sit there and they are just so real about all this stuff. Like, and they give real life examples of their own experiences. And so it's really, I think, why these conversations, I think, are so valuable because we come from authenticity.
Absolutely. And I was laughing, Jen, because when you were when you were saying that, I don't know how many people here are familiar with Monty Python and Spam-A-Lot, but there's a character in Spam-A-Lot where no matter what they do, he keeps on living, and his phrase is always, "I'm not dead yet." And so you you brought that to my mind. So thank you for giving me a good chuckle.
You're welcome. You're welcome. Glad to oblige. And so, but it is, we feel like we're like, oh my gosh, like, how can I go through this?
Yeah, it
And
feels like the end.
it feels like the end of the world, the end of ourselves, which for us is our world. And but when you do it, and like Seamus says, and when you go through it multiple times or in different situations, and when you're still here and you get over it, then all of a sudden it reinforces this whole idea of, okay, well, I'm better off looking at this rather than avoiding this.
Absolutely. It's you reminded me how, when we were talking because well, I guess getting over it, and you were speaking about grief and stuff a few minutes ago, and it's just interesting, right? Because there's um that's a common phrase, right? Especially when you're in a grieving process, it's like people are like, well, aren't you over it yet? Or get over it. What's the matter? Go on. But just it reminded me then of the of how we were talking about, with the river flowing and um yeah, I mean it meets I mean, it might come across rocks or bends in the twists in its path, but how it finds ways to flow around it no matter what. And it's the same too with grief or situations that maybe feel a little bit heavy. Um, you know, it's not really about getting over it. It's about working around it. So there was a meme, I know Jan, you and I have shared that with each other before, of like, having, the thing, whatever the grief is, the loss, it could be a loss of anything really, and how we grow and flow around it. We don't get over it. We surround it and we move forward.
I think, yeah, I think it just becomes almost like you morph, like you change. I
Hmm.
mean, because the bottom line is you can't go back to the way things were as much as you would like to. I mean,
Yes.
I'm not going to wake up tomorrow and Tonka's going to be here.
Yes,
You know,
exactly.
it's just not going to happen. And so, so I sit there and I have to somehow move forward and through and not avoid eventually, maybe. I mean, can't say that I'm totally processing right now because well, maybe my heart is processing and my body is processing. My brain is definitely out to lunch these days. Yes, probably because so much energy is being used other places. And so my brain is kind of like, you know, I'm not firing with all cylinders of late. So, but that's when like using your body and doing work like this, like, you heal from the heart and your body heals. And eventually the brain will come around. But that's why doing like embodied work is so important because you can process in another way.
Yeah,
And I think,
absolutely.
and if you look at what we don't process, if we don't process emotions or situations, experiences, um, it ends up affecting us physically in some way or another
Hmm.
anyway.
Yes.
On some level, it ends up depositing in the body, and then we can't like, we end up with something that happens. Um, because it gets stuck there. Basically, it needs to be worked through.
Yeah, absolutely. It's the getting stuck. It's true. We it's human nature, we we really want to just have what we think we want to have is a smooth life with nothing ever happening, and just, to do our thing or whatever. But that's not where the learning happens. That's not where the growth happens, is it? It happens in the times where we feel that resistance, and just taking a look at that and just really acknowledging it for what it is. Um, you know, Human beings in general, I guess, don't always like change, particularly well, or we think we don't, but really, that's, as the saying goes, the only thing that's constant is change. So, so it's just resisting that can be very difficult for sure.
Absolutely. It's so interesting how, our human our inability to be uncomfortable. It's like, how and what to what to what we'll go to escape that uncomfortableness.
Yes.
Like how we will do, like how much time we spend distracting ourselves and what that, you know, we're very skilled.
If only we could be skilled at so many other things, right?
That's right. Well, if you think about how much skill it takes to avoid something and how we get really, really creative at trying to avoid that, if we were to like redirect that energy in some way.
Yeah,
to
absolutely.
to something else,
Hmm.
and to redirect it into something that's a little bit more constructive or a little bit more positive, or you know that it might be kind of interesting. And not to say that you can distract yourself with very positive things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
It doesn't have to be, negative things. It can be very a pizza. You're my favorite food, Al. So you're talking to the right person. But yeah, how we can and it can be food, but it could be just other things. I mean, where you avoid because you don't really, want to deal with something. Most of the time, we all have something.
Isn't that too? So there you go. So when we get to when we have our in-person get together with Al, we have to have pizza. Um,
That's right.
um, but yeah, it is yay, Austin's happy about that. So it's interesting, right? Because how we, you know, when we resist or avoidance, whichever term you which you want to use it, it's either one could be pretty much interchangeable, but um, we often think that we're going to get relief from that, but we don't get relief from that. It's just really repeating the same things over and over again because it doesn't go away. It just keeps repeating and repeating. But isn't it beautiful that yeah, as you were saying, that Jan is like the awareness is the beginning of change. And yeah, isn't it amazing that when we sit and we become aware of that, the resistance or what we're avoiding, it really does create that space for change. So it's just a beautiful.
And the word awareness, because I think that, as if we're aware of it, we might choose to stay, but it's done with awareness versus
Mm,
done,
yes.
automatically or unconsciously. And that there's an awareness to it. And it's kind of like, oh, I know I'm not, I know I'm avoiding at the moment, not to, and with I mean, for me, it's like, oh, I know I'm not feeling this at the moment. I know I will, but at this moment, for whatever, I can't. Um, might be I feel like it's going to overcome me too much. I might be in a situation where I don't feel like I can do it at the moment or place. And so it's like, okay, I'm going to avoid, not with the intention of totally never dealing,
No.
but with the intention of saying, okay, well, not right now. Not right
And that's
now.
the human condition too. But it's awesome though, um, that's true. See, Seamus says at least you're having the conversation. That's that's true. But
Absolutely.
it's I think sometimes, I mean, you know, when we're sitting with whatever it is that we're resisting, whatever it is that we're finding that it's a difficult situation, a challenge that we're having, it just really, I think sitting and giving yourself the love and compassion that you would give to others that were going through a difficult time as they're trying to figure out their way to flow, right? Like that's, as we've spoken before, we're often not as compassionate to ourselves as we are to other people. And it's really just reconnecting to that and not being resistant to being compassionate to ourselves because sometimes it's that too. We
Mm.
feel like we're being selfish if we give ourselves the compassion and nurturing and love that we deserve um, equally to others around us. So compassion is a big part of sitting with resistance.
Absolutely. And one of the things, and I think the other thing is that, it's, I don't know, I don't think, we, I don't know, at least I can speak for myself. I mean, we grow up, or I grew up, and it was kind of like you were just supposed to move on and move on quickly. Like, just like in not only in grief, but in everything. Like, you're just supposed to, like, basically, oh, okay, that happened. Okay, it was upsetting, go. And I think that one is, like you said, it's not so easy. So I think we tend to almost gaslight ourselves. It's not that we're, it's like we gaslight ourselves and we're like sitting there going, okay, I shouldn't feel this. I shouldn't deal with this. I should be over this. I should move on already. And so that's the dialogue that goes on in our heads often, where, first of all, it's not realistic in many situations to sit there and, you know, think that you're not going to have and you're going to move on really, really quickly, and to recognize that there are moments that you might move on, but there are moments when it might resurface again. So, Austin, please.
Thank you, Jan. I really love that you threw in the piece about intention with awareness. So I can certainly see in my own experience how awareness might have gotten me to the second plate. And then in a kind of meta sort of way, through intention, um, here's it. So what's coming to mind and stopping me is like when we talk about bypassing and what does it mean to bypass? And just to keep it on one synopsis here, I've at least noticed that having awareness can get you to one place, but then there comes a point where intention becomes very practical for you because if you're aware of your awareness, so if you're experiencing a lot of metacog or your clairs are picking up, sometimes, speaking for myself anyway, it's easy to beat ourselves up over, oh, well, I knew I could have XYZ, but then I didn't. And I love that Jan threw out there about, being aware of it and accepting it, and then realizing my intention though is to not leave this and run away. It's there and I can come back to it was certainly empowering for me when I could continue to anchor that in and realize, no, 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 I can really trust myself that how I was processing was meant for that moment. And it doesn't mean I have to forego it, but it also doesn't mean that I will inevitably forgive it and not forgive it as in bypass. So I hope that made sense. Thank you.
And thank you, Austin. Yes, it was clear, and I think it's really true, because I think that we in all our av avoidance and resistance isn't necessarily bad. Um, you know, if you're doing any strength training or athletics, I mean, resistance is a good thing. It helps build muscle. Um, in pregnancy, the resistance of the cell on the amniotic fluid causes the cell to divide, which one of my students is an OB nurse. And so she told me that many years ago, which is like, if you think about it, that's amazing, because life happens because of resistance and friction. And so I think that it's almost like, you could say there's healthy resistance where, you deal or sort of process or allow a certain amount of something, emotions, experiences, or whatever. And then, you get to determine, no one can determine for you what's enough for you. Meaning how much you can handle. No one else can, everybody's different, and everybody's had different experiences and different upbringings and comes from different places and everything. And so it's not like a cookie cutter. It's almost like, when they like, when we were talking about grief, and I love some of the grief work, but it was always like, okay, these are the steps of grief. And then it was kind of like they were in a particular order and all this stuff. And they became very kind of scientific about the whole thing. And then all of a sudden it was kind of like, well, I'm angry before I feel sad, or whatever. And there is no right or wrong way. It's your way. I mean, with this whole thing with Tonka, no one can know what the experience is for me. I mean, people who know me know that it's a loss. And if they know me really well, they know it's a huge loss for me. But I'm the only one who knows the extent of our connect. I was the one who loved him the most. And so I'm the only one who can truly, share what like knows what that experience is like for me.
Yeah, absolutely, Jen. That's it's very true, right? Because we can all be going through very similar situations depending on what it is, and our feeling, our own personal feelings, our own take on what the situation is like and how that feels in our hearts and in our bodies is very personal. That is for sure. But just a beautiful um feeling that, as I was saying to you the other day, it's like, because we're strong believers that energy is everywhere, and we are believers of of feeling that energy is everywhere, and I know even though his picture is present with us today, I know Tonka's energy is with us always, because that's just the way you loved him and he loved you back. So it's just
Absolutely. But one of the things is that I'm just thinking a conversation I had with my mom. So he passed on like Saturday, June 13th. And on Sunday, June 14th, for the last 2 weeks, I basically have left home, and I'm pet sitting. So I'm not in the house, and I have a dog, which has been a blessing.
mhm.
Loud, but a blessing.
Shh, he's gonna start barking.
I know. So it's been very hard. I have had to go home, but it's been very hard to be in the house, and I've actually been avoiding it.
Mhm.
His presence is so missed that I just like, the house seems really empty, because especially since COVID, I mean, we were attached at the hip for everywhere. Like, he went everywhere with me he could go, every
Mhm.
shopping trip, every meeting, um, everywhere. And otherwise we were home. And so, I mean, I can probably count on my hands the amount of time we spent separated. And so being in the house is really challenging. But I know I'm avoiding it. My mother said to me, you have to go home eventually. I mean, actually on Sunday I'm going home. And there is a little bit of dread, like, and fear around that. Like, oh my gosh, like, what's it going to be like? And how will I cope? And what will I do? And kind of knowing that I'm probably going to break down, and I'm probably going to cry, and um and I'm probably going to look at his pictures 1,000 times a day that I have out, but you know, it's not like I know I can't avoid it forever, but I do think that this was a true blessing, the fact that I was not home for 2 weeks. And I had this time with another pet, because this is the first time in 40 years that I don't have an animal in the house, either a cat or dog. And so that's like a big thing. And so it's like, but it was for me, it was a gift. And I looked at it like that, like it was divinely timed.
Mhm. Yes.
And so but yeah, I think that you have to go home eventually, and I do.
Ah, yes. The joys of our human beingness, isn't it? I say that with air quotes around the joys, because I mean, we know that with the joy comes the sorrow too. That's the juxtaposition, the paradox of our existence, isn't it? But yeah, I mean, your awareness of that, Jan, though, is a big thing. I mean, you're aware that there's a resistance there, and that's okay. It's all
Mhm.
right that there's a resistance there. I think that's natural. But you're also aware of it, so you're also sitting with that emotion and realizing that, um, that there it may not be exactly the same, but knowing that there's a way forward, but through that way forward may come with a few tears. That's for sure. It's I mean, which is natural for anyone that we love or we have deep connection with. It doesn't matter whether it's person or animal. Um, it's
or,
they're still part of us.
right, or a change in life or career or
Yes.
location. I mean, it all happens. I mean, it doesn't matter. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be, you move, and all of a sudden there is that loss, or Like you were, and obviously your whole transition out of corporate was a
Yes.
blessing in many ways, but all the people that you were close to that you had to leave behind. And I think that that all happens too. And I think that um, I keep on saying, and I think that at one point in the thread, Seamus said something, and it's really true. I'm just going to see if I can find it. Yeah, he said I have so much to be thankful for in all situations, and I know that for me, but like over the last 2 weeks, it's like, would I have given up my time for him not to have to suffer now? No, I wouldn't have given up 1 second. Well, maybe the second he chewed my wall, but otherwise, I probably wouldn't have given him up. Why did you choose the wall? Chew the wall because it was there, Mom. That's all I could say because he had plenty of toys and bones. But but it's like in general, we have these things, and so the experiences we have, like, would I have given up, like my previous career? No, not in any way. It created who I was. Like that whole transformation of, like, let's say, of who I became and what I know is all based on everything that I've ever experienced. So Al, please.
Yeah, very interesting. The river of resistance, it's a reflection of our lives. Whenever, like, when the flow down the river that go through the creeks, and there's a lot of resistance, then you're trying to find another path, to find another options in our life path, where we're going. If the life path A is stuck, then we try to go on life path B and life path C. If there's more and more options. So basically, our lives is like full of recognition. Yeah. So it comes to the acronym of this week, which is recognitions, which instills I, values, empowering, revelation. So our revelation is like the aha moments that we find in our lives. Yeah. So like where the divine actually leading us, the divine communication from a supernatural entity. So this is where the revelation, they are bringing us forward in our path every day. So one day will give you the challenge, then the next day will give you the enjoyment. So the challenge will be the resistance, and there'll be the river. When it flows, sometimes you cannot find the different creek. You're stuck in between the pebbles and all that. You'll find another way to flow to another open path, where it leads to the mouth, the sea mouth bed, and goes into the deep ocean, where we actually exposed to the entire world. Yeah. So, and this is the fact of our life. Yeah. So we just have to keep going on and on, and keep persistence, the recognition of this river that actually flows in our daily lives. Similarly, in our bodies, like what Mary Jane said earlier on, our bodies are very vulnerable. You never know when the arteries will get stuck, some certain parts of our body, because the flow is not freely flowing, because the arteries will be blocked. So sometimes we have to recognize always our body also needs our entire life of make sure that we take care of it well, like self care, self love, and self compassion. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Al. And I sent Mary Jane a link to an article an excerpt from Elizabeth Lesser's book, Broken Open, which I read. So this is an excerpt from a chapter, and she talks about, her, like, what she basically prays at the end of the day. And she says, am I going to flow with my river nature today? Or am I going to swim against it? This is what I ask myself when I get out of bed each morning and when I go to sleep. I apologize to the river gods for any hard strokes I made against the current and for splashing about like a drowning person. I pray that tomorrow I may once again know the pleasure of following my soul downstream because I've known rivers. And once you've known rivers, once you've stretched out on the dark waters, trusting the river gods, going in the direction of life, even if it's head first toward the rapids, you want to taste that water again. You want your soul to grow deep like the rivers again. And I read this, probably many years ago, that book. But this chapter of like flowing with the river and flowing with our nature and flowing with life. And, and I think we've all, swum against a current at one point or another, or even walked against it. When you walk against the wind and you know what that resistance feels like, and we all know what, if you've ever, been in any body of water and let yourself go and just flow with the waves or flow with the current, you know what that's like too. And so I think we know both. And that's an experience. I think that's a very tangible experience that we get to experience. And I think we all know what it's like to flow with life too. And thank you for the wave, Al. And Mary Jane. But I think that we all know what that feels like, to step into the flow of the river, and then what it feels like to resist that. And to know when we're able to do both.
Yeah, that's the key too, right? The knowing, the being aware of being able to do both simultaneously all at once.
Right, exactly. And different in every situation. Like in
Mhm.
certain situations, you may be able to flow, and in other situations, you're like, not right now. And kind of knowing that and being aware of that. And I think, when we talk about, being quiet and actually listening and kind of saying, okay, it's like those questions of like, okay, take a breath and sit. And am I able to, where am I today? And how do I feel? And am I aware, like, do I have the presence and the, and the energy to move with this at the moment?
Yeah, absolutely. It was just, you know, it's also just that awareness of, being the juxtaposition of being everything all at once. It's just realizing that, as much as we want flow to happen, um, and it will happen, but I love the concept that they're in the articles that they were talking about, where it's saying that flow emerges when resistance softens, and um,
Mm.
that is so poignant to me because, when you think of resistance, or for me, when I think of resistance, it's hard and it's edgy and it's uncomfortable, or it can be that way. But I just love that flow emerges when resistance softens. It's just a beautiful visual.
That's beautiful, Mary Jane. And it's right, it's so true, because when we think of resistance, we think of like armed guards,
Yes.
we think of the Borg.
Yes. Yes.
Um, armed guards, and we think of a wall,
Hmm.
that's, impenetrable, and that, the flow happens when you soften. But even just the word softens, it's like
Yes.
it's like it almost feels like a breath, right? It feels like it softens. And if you think
Hmm.
of that breath of like, inhale, exhale, and you allow your body to soften,
Hmm.
and what even happens physically, like the tension goes. And that's the other word, what is resistance? It's tension.
Absolutely. I feel just when you were talking about breathing and softening, I was like, oh, I could feel that in my body. Thank you, Jan.
You're welcome. You're welcome. No, it's really true though.
Yes.
It's, we all feel it on a physical level. I mean, if you breathe in and you kind of go to your capacity, there is that tension, that resistance of the container that is your body. And so you can push the edges, So you can go from one end to the other, feeling the resistance on both sides. And that's not to say that that's not useful. It's kind of like you get to physically experience what resistance is like.
We live it daily, yes.
That's right. We live it daily. And then we get to soften and we know what that's like to have it
Mhm.
flow a little bit more easily from one end to the other.
Mm, beautiful, Jen. What a good segue.
Thank you.
You know, a good segue to our meditation.
Absolutely. So we will move into the meditation. Begin by finding a comfortable position. Allow your body to settle in a way that feels supported, not rigid, not collapsed, just at ease. If it feels comfortable, gently close your eyes or you can soften your gaze. Take a moment to notice that you are here. No need to change anything, no need to arrive anywhere else, just noticing. Bring your attention to your breath, not controlling it, not deepening it, just noticing the natural rhythm of breathing. The inhale and the exhale. As you sit here, you might begin to notice what is present. Sensations in the body, thoughts moving through the mind, emotions subtle or strong. There's no need to sort them out, just noticing. And now gently begin to notice, is there anything you are resisting at this moment? It might be something obvious or something very subtle, a tightness in the body, a thought you don't want to have, a feeling you'd rather not feel. Just notice. Without needing to change it, see if you can simply acknowledge this is here, this too belongs. Notice what happens when you stop pushing it away, even for a moment. You might feel the body soften slightly, or you might not. Either way is okay. This is not about making something happen. It's about allowing what is already here. If there's tension, see if you can't bring your attention to that place. Not to fix it, but to be with it gently, curiously. You might silently offer, it's okay that this is here. And just notice what shifts or doesn't. If the mind starts to move into analysis or judgment, that too can be included. Nothing needs to be pushed away. Nothing needs to be held on to. Just this, breathing, noticing, allowing. And if it feels right, you might gently explore what happens when I don't resist this moment. Not answering with the mind, but sensing and feeling with the body. Perhaps there's a little more space. Perhaps there was a softening. Or perhaps there is simple awareness. Whatever is here is enough. Take a few moments here, resting in the experience of not needing to push anything away. And when you're ready, gently begin to bring your awareness back, noticing the body, the room around you, or the space around you, and slowly, gently opening your eyes, carrying with you the possibility that even in difficult moments, there may be another way to meet what is here now. Not with resistance, but with awareness. Thank you all for joining us this morning or this afternoon or evening, depending on your time zone. We are really so happy that you joined us and your shares. We appreciate you all. As always, feel free to share or comment on the link for the recording. Wishing you a wonderful week ahead, and depending on where you are, it's Canada Day in Canada and July 4th in the United States. So have a wonderful week of celebrations and holidays if that's what you're doing.
Absolutely. Have a blessed weekend, everyone.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Bye, Mary.